A Rabbinic Anthology selected by C.G. Montefiore and H.Loewe. Continuing selection 421. This is what Adam did, really Eve, who added the prohibition against touching the tree. Genesis 3:3. He made a fence higher than the object, and the fence fell and crushed the plants, i.e., he broke the command. He began by touching the tree. Then he ate and fell. ABRN verse 2:1-2a. Now let us remember, when we say the term fallen angel, or at least when I say it, I don't mean that they switched from being light beings to fire beings. They were a different type of creation to begin with. They fell in the same way, by decisions. 422, Sephra, Numbers, Shalach, section 112, folio 33a, H page 121. Basing his words upon the severe verse, Numbers 15:31, R. Elazar of Modaim said, if a man says, I accept all the Torah, with one exception, or if he says, all the Torah was spoken by God, with the exception of one passage, which was spoken by Moses, he has despised the word of the Lord, and is worthy to be thrust out of the world, i.e., of the world to come. See selections 1585 and 1586, but contrast 1610, Sifra Numbers, Shalach, section 112, folio 33a, H page 121. Our Modin, the home of the Maccabees, is said to have been 15 miles from Jerusalem, according to Neubauer, page 99. It is El Medea by Lida, and that's H.L.'s note. And there's a lot of truth to that statement if we regard the fact that this is reference to what's supposed to be the revelation to Moses. Now, if it's just the books attributed as such, but if this is actually what Moses said was revelation, such and such, to say that what Moses said was revelation wasn't all revelation, and it was really his words in some part, that's a problem. Now, you could say some stuff was inspired. It's hard to tell which is which in the Bible sometimes, though. And another note by H.L., this was possibly directed against an arrogant sectarian, see the context in selection 423, or against a proselyte who wished to dictate his terms of admission. For proselytes were initiated into the commandments gradually. In the same way, however tolerantly a bishop might treat his clergy, he would, we may presume, be compelled to refuse ordination to a candidate who expressly accepted one of the 39 articles from his declaration. H.L. made that note. 423, Sephra Numbers, Shalach, section 112, folio 33a, HP, page 121, Abbott 3:15. R. Elazar of Modaim said, he who profanes the holy things, i.e. the sanctuary, and despises the festivals, and breaks the covenant of Abraham our father, even if he has in his hand many commandments, good deeds, is worthy to be thrust out of the world, i.e. the world to come. See selections 536 and 857, Sifra Numbers, Shalach, 112, folio 33a, H page 121, and Abbott 3:15. And remember, to the end of Lowe's introduction, I appended the portion that goes into the abbreviations. There's a huge difference even between disobeying a commandment and disbelieving a commandment, especially if you're considering this is supposed to be the book of Moses. If you believe that these books are totally the book of Moses, then how can you deny any of it, right? 424, Sifra, Deuteronomy, section 79, folio 91a, page 145. Let the light command be as beloved to thee as the weighty one. Sifra, Deuteronomy, 79, 91a, 145. Section 425. Der Z35. If you become slack about one commandment, you will end by becoming slack about another. If you despise one, you will end by despising another. Der Z35. Contact with Christians and the arguments of those who accepted the teachings of Paul made the rabbis cling the more devoutly to the law. It was immutable. It was given as a whole. No new law or no new covenant was to follow it. And according to what the Bible has about Jesus, Jesus didn't believe in the new covenant either. He wanted to restore the law. But restore the law meant, this is what came through the prophets, and leave aside some of what came through the rabbis. Like, it's apparent from the Bible that Jesus took no part in Hanukkah or Purim, and some of the extra interpretations. 426, Tut-R, Nitzabim 8:6. It is written, for this commandment is not in heaven. Deuteronomy 30:11-12, or is that supposed to be 2:12? Verses 11 and 12. They really should use different ones between the sides. But anyways, Moses said to the Israelites, lest you should say, another Moses is to rise, and to bring us another law from heaven. Therefore, I make it known to you now that it is not in heaven, nothing is left of it in heaven. R. Chanina said, the law and all the implements by which it is carried out have been given, namely modesty, beneficence, uprightness, and reward. Deuteronomy R. Nitzabim 8:6. And one of the things about that, though, is that isn't Deuteronomy word of the prophecy about somebody who goes to Yemen? Well, there's the going to Yemen, and then the coming back to the Lord's house, and establishing a fiery law, and fiery as in, filled with the Spirit, or, strong-willed. The polemic intention is obvious and interesting. The prophets and the sages only draw out the implications of the law, i.e. the Pentateuchal Code, 427, Tanch, Yitro, section 11, folio 124a, finished 124b. R. Isaac said, the prophets drew from Sinai the inspiration of all their future utterances, for God spoke with him that stands here with us this day. Deuteronomy 29:15, that is, with those who were already created. Those who were already created, and also with him that is not here with us this day. These are the souls which are destined to be created. So too it does not say the burden of the Lord to Malachi, Malachi 1:1, but by the hand of Malachi, to show that the prophecy was already in his hand at Mount Sinai, so too in Isaiah 48:16 it says, "From the time that it was, there am I." That is, from the hour when Torah was given, I received this prophecy. Not only to the prophets alone does this apply, but to all the sages that are destined to arise in after days. For the Decalogue is described in Deuteronomy 5:22 as one great voice, and this was divided into 7 and then into 70 tongues for all mankind. Tanch Yitro, section 11, folio 124a, fin to 124b, selection 428, Tanch B Re'eh 10a. Asaph said, "Give ear, O my people, to my law." Psalm 78:1. And Solomon said, "Forsake ye not my law." Proverbs 4:2. Israel said to Asaph, "Is there then another law, that thou speakest of my law? We have already received the law at Sinai." He said to them, "There are sinners in Israel who say that the prophets and the holy writings are not Torah, and we will not obey them." Daniel 9:10. But the prophets and the holy writings are Torah. Hence it says, "Give ear, O my people, to my law." Tanch B Re'eh 10a. Torah indeed is often very inadequately translated by law. The word does often mean the Pentateuch are its codes. It means too the rabbinic or oral law. It means, as in the last passage, all scripture, and it must also be taken to include the whole of Revelation, all that God has made known of his nature, character, and purpose, and of what he would have man be and do. This illustrates the growth of the canon. See page, selection 1060. And we will not obey them. That portion is where that is from. To the unwritten law, the religious and moral teachings of the Haggadah belong no less to the juristically formulated rules of the Halakha. In a word, Torah in one aspect is the vehicle, in another and deeper view it is the whole content of Revelation. More, volume 1, page 263. See also page 7 of R. Travers Hereford's Talm and Apok, London, 1933, chapter 15, page CIV, and note 70. 429 from Midrash Psalm on 78:1, 172b, section 1. Let not a man say, the Psalms are not Torah. They are Torah, and the prophets too are Torah, and the riddles and the parables are also Torah. Midrash Psalm 178:1, 172b, section 1. The oral law was, in one sense, even more precious than the written law, for it was Israel's unique possession. The Pentateuch formed part of the Christian Bible, but the oral law was the exclusive privilege of Israel. Well, there was a Babylonian Talmud too, but the people who called themselves Israel, not by ancestry, because it wasn't quite the same thing as ancestry, and it really wasn't as the centuries went on. But they called themselves basically Mujahideen, because that's the Arabic equivalent. I throw that in. So, 430, numbers R, Naso, 1410. God gave the Israelites the two laws, the written law and the oral law. He gave them the written law with its 613 ordinances to fill them with commandments and to cause them to become virtuous, as it is said, the Lord, a mistranslation of God as a verb and noun probably, was pleased for his righteousness' sake to increase the law and make it glorious, and he gave them the oral law to make them distinguished from the other nations. It was not given in writing so that the nations should not falsify it, as they have done with the written law. And say that they are not the true Israel. Therefore, it says, if I were to write it for him, the many things of my law, they would be counted as strange. Hosea 8:12. The many things are the Mishnah, which is larger than the law. And God says, if I were to write for Israel, the many things, they would be accounted as strange by the Gentiles. Numbers R, Neso 14:10. Now, in Islam, we have the same thing to a lesser extent. In some other paths, too, is this idea that prophets received revelation, and some of them received inspiration, too. So verbatim stuff to memorize, and general teachings and directions of teachings that you could say were in their own words. I think that's the right way to put that. Numbers Neso 14:10. This passage and selection 431 and 434 are clearly Jewish replies to the Christian claim to be the true Israel on the basis of the possession of the scriptures. Well, what about the 74 books that are mentioned that aren't included, right? Dr. Parks, Conflict of Church and Synagogue, London 1934, page 97, etc., has much to say about this controversy. Particularly significant is 105 HL. 431, Tunch B. Ketissa 58B, Tunch Weira, section 5, folio 33A. God said to Moses, write thee these things, for it is by means of these things that I have made a covenant with Israel. Exodus 34:27. When God was about to give the Torah, he recited it to Moses in due order, scriptures, Mishnah, Agada, and Talmud, for God spake all these words. 21. Remember what was said in an earlier program, that the rabbis basically admitted that they even used Moses and stuff to put forward their own opinions. So, even the answers to quotations, which distinguished scholars in the future are destined to act as their teacher, did God reveal to Moses? For he spake all these things. Oh, the 21 was Exodus 20, verse 1. Then, when God had ended, he said to Moses, go and teach it to my sons. I don't know what the words intelligences are, pure productions or sources of goodness, whatever. Words left out. Moses said, Lord, do thou write it for them. And probably the term is established. God said, I did indeed desire to give it to all of them in writing, but it was revealed that the Gentiles, those who turn their back on God is probably the word used, in the future will have dominion over them and will claim the Torah as theirs. Then would my children be like the Gentiles. Therefore, give them the scriptures in writing, and Mishnah, Agada, and Talmud orally, for it is they which separate Israel and the Gentiles. Note 26 and 94. Tunch B. Ketissa 58B. Tunch Weira, section 5, folio 33A. Now, as opposed to in what you call Judaism, in Islam, right away, people were recording physically the narratives. So the first generation, it wasn't something hundreds of years go by, and then we have fiqh and Sharia and stuff like this. This is not, the hadith books went right away, and there was the law to begin with. But 432, Pass R 7B. No man should say, I will not observe the precepts of the elders, i.e. the oral law, since they are not of Mosaic authority, literally contained in the Torah. For God has said, Nay, my son, but whatsoever they decree for thee, do thou perform, as it says, according to the Torah, which the i.e. the elders in days to come, shall teach thee, shalt thou do. Deuteronomy 17:11. For even for me do they make decrees, as it says, when thou, i.e. the elders, dost decree a command, it shall be fulfilled for thee, i.e. by me. A playful interpretation of Job 22:28, Pes R 7b. Sometimes development or plasticity seems to be recognized as possible as regards new rulings in the oral law. See note 27. And I'm not sure how long each of the notes are, but maybe I'll do a different program for each one of those when we come across them. And that's another difference here with Islam, is that the Shariat law is what came through Muhammad, and it's up to each to interpret for themselves. There's no requirement to follow anybody who knew Muhammad, or, authority doesn't come just because somebody knew Muhammad or was related to Muhammad. Is this interpretation something that's going to work for you? And not work for, it's not about your own sentiment and all that either. 433. Chul 6b, finish 7a. My point was you can step aside from the whole conservative thing. Before we get into that, in the Decapolis by Mount Gilboa and Mount Gilboa and Jezreel, Josiah 17:11, and 1 Samuel 31:10. Bethshan, later called the Scythopolis, according to Josephus, Vita 6, it was inhabited by pagans. I'm sure they mean polytheists. But the Jewish citizens were strict in their observance. Pes 50b, as this passage indicates. Neubauer, cited page 174, and that notes HL. I guess it's Joshua 17:11. R. Joshua B. Zeruz, the son of the father-in-law of R. Me'er, testified before R. Judah, the patriarch, that R. Me'er had eaten a leaf of a herb at Beth Shean without having tithed it. Wherefore R. Judah declared all Beth Shean's produce as permitted, i.e. the produce of Beth Shean was to be regarded as having been tithed already. Then his brothers and his father's house protested against him, and said, a place which your father and your father's fathers regarded as forbidden would you treat as permitted. Then he taught them how Hezekiah broke the brazen serpent which Moses had made, for unto those days the Israelites had burnt incense to it. 2 Kings 18:4. And he said, how could Asa and Jehoshaphat not have removed it, seeing that they removed all the idols from the land? 1 Kings 15:12. Well, just like the 10 plagues, some of the oldest sons would have died because it was more common considering the circumstances, but not all of them, so relatively. But as his fathers left room for Hezekiah To distinguish himself, so too my predecessors left me room to distinguish myself. Hence we may learn that if a scholar pronounces a new rule, halakha, they do not make him give up his opinion, or as some read, they do not reject him, or as some read, they do not reproach him as being haughty. Chul 6b finished to 7a. When the scriptures were read in synagogue, a translator stood beside the reader and rendered the Hebrew into the vernacular. The reader was forbidden to take his eyes off the scroll, i.e., to improvise or trust to memory or use a written version, for only the Torah was given in writing, as it says, I will write upon the tables, Exodus 34:1. Judah B. Pazzi said, write thee these words, same source, Exodus 34, verse 27, is a pregnant verse. The scriptures were given in writing, but the translator was forbidden to look into the scroll, since the Targum translation was oral, for it goes on to say, according to it, literally by the mouth of these words are Judah, the son of H.Loewe, remarked, Moses desired that the oral law, literally the Mishnah, should be written also, but God foresaw that the Gentiles would one day translate the Torah and read it in Greek, and say, they, the Jews, are not the true Israel. God said to Moses, the nations will say, we are the true Israel. We are the sons of God. And Israel will say, we are the sons of God. And now the scales are evenly balanced. So God said to the Gentiles, why do you claim to be my sons? I know only him who has my mastery in his possession. He is my son. And then the Gentiles asked, what is thy mystery? God replied, it is the Mishnah, i.e. the oral law, Pes R 14b. And there's a lot of talk by rabbis about, how we're indifferent to Christianity and stuff. It's like, there's a whole lot of stuff where it's obvious that they're not indifferent. Pes R 14b. The translation, see page 44 and 437. We're on page 161, but the lectionary was a very important element in public worship, since a literal reading would sometimes be unintelligible and sometimes misleading. The introduction of a certain amount of exegesis was inevitable. For example, Leviticus 23:13. This amount was considerably less in the Pentateuch than in the prophets. In the latter, far more freedom and expansion were permitted, but this opportunity for exegesis naturally became the medium for the affirmation of doctrine and the repudiation of heresy. Hence the scripture translations became centers of controversy. We read of marginal glosses, which probably indicated Christological proof texts and contained arguments for opinions deemed heretical, when Christianity had definitely parted from Judaism. The provision of a canon became imperative. But once it was settled which books were included and which were to be excluded, Jews and Christians found themselves in common possession of a written Bible, that is to say, of the Old Testament. Therefore, neither could claim to be the chosen people on the basis of the ownership of the sacred writings alone. It was the exegesis in each case that was regarded as a special distinction and the title to true belief. So among the Jews, the oral law was the sign that Israel was God's people. It was the mystery to which this passage refers. It is sometimes a secret password or a king's private sign. It must not be published. Thus, the angels of the presence were expelled for revealing the mystery, i.e. God's purpose. Jan R. Wayura 59, the page 524. The dying Jacob, like a king's friend on his deathbed who wishes to reveal the king's mystery to his friends, See Shekinah, i.e. the redemption of Kirch through Hannah's prayer. I think that's what they mean by Korah. See 98, verse 2, page 1251. The mystery is esoteric. Thus, mystery passages are written in a solution of gallnuts, TJ Sabbath 12, section 4, 13d, but sometimes the mystery is a token, as in this passage of the Pesekda Rabbate. Conversely, among Christians, this gave rise to the idea of a pre-incarnation church claiming all the Old Testament heroes as Christian saints and leaving to Judaism only the sinners, Israelites and Gentiles, respectively. Thus, David and Samuel were Christian, Amalek and Korah were Jews. Well, technically, they were the Israelites, weren't they? This mode of interpretation gave rise, according to Parks, to anti-Semitism. Well, anti-Semitism is not the same thing as anti-Jewish, because obviously they favored the good Israelites, as far as the tribe was concerned. See his essay in Judaism and Christianity, Volume 2, edited H.Loewe, 1937, page 127. And the Latter-day Saints have a refined version of that doctrine, that Christianity was supposed to be the religion and, they just forgot, or, that's not the right words, but you know what I mean. There is an excellent note on scriptural translation and translators in Rabinowitz's edition of Mishnah, Megillah, page 121 to 123. For the pre-incarnation church and anti-Semitism, see Parks, page 105 to 106, and selection 430 HL. The rabbis, however, valued the Haggadah, the non-legal portions of the oral law, only a little less than the strictly legal portions, see HL. HL's what he has said in selection 350, 435. They who searched out the implications of the scripture said, if you wish to know the creator of the world, learn Haggadah. For from it you will learn to know God and cleave to his ways, Sefer Deuteronomy, Akab, section 49, folio 85A, page 115. The people alluded to here, Drashah, Rushimot, were a particular group of preachers of whom little is known, though they are mentioned several times. See Cohen, Bear, page 158, and the note, Judaism and Christianity, volume 2. See H.Loewe, page 7, and the footnote, H.L.'s note. The Haggadah, while the form was Agadah in the previous reading, right? But, those different terms for oral Torah. The rabbis related that the chief men among them had not always agreed among themselves. Nevertheless, the Spirit of God was with them all. For example, the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel differed on many rulings, but both were the words of the living God. See page 656. We are on page 163. Selection 436. Pass R 8A, CP 8B. The words of the wise are as goads, Keter Bonot, which are given from one shepherd, Ecclesiastes 12:11. R. Barachia said, what is the meaning of like goads? Keter Bonot? It means Kadur Bonot, a girl's ball, which maidens toss in sport from one to another, one hither, one thither. So it is when the sages enter the house of study and are occupied with the law. One says its meaning is this, and another says its meaning is that. One gives such an opinion, his fellow a different one. But they all were given from one shepherd, that is, from Moses, who received the teaching from him who is one and unique in the world. Note 71, see that, pass R 8a and 8b. For the reading toss, see Becher's note on the passage on page 66 in Studies in, words left out, honor of K. Kohler, Berlin, 1913. Many are the things which, for homiletic purposes, the law is compared. Oil, wine, honey are among the most frequent. Notice some of the references in Sufi literature. Follow along with some of that. 437. 437. Canticles R1, section 2 and 3 on 1, 2, folio 6a, C selection 506, if that is posted. The words of the law are compared with water, wine, oil, honey, and milk. See selection 356. With water, as it says, Ho, everyone that thirsts, come ye to the waters. Isaiah 55:1. As the waters extend from one end of the earth to the other, for it says, to him that stretched out the earth above the waters. Psalm 136:6. So the law is extended from one end of the world to another. As it is said, the measure thereof is longer than the earth and broader than the sea. Job 11:9. As water gives life to the world, so the law gives life to the world. As it says, it is life to those who find it. Proverbs 4:22. As the water covers the nakedness of the sea, so the law covers the nakedness of Israel. As it says, love covers all sins. Proverbs 10:12. As the water comes down in drops and becomes streams, so a man learns to halakas a day. I don't know what the plural is. That's just, they add an S because they're putting this in English. Until he becomes a bubbling spring. As water is pleasant only to the thirsty, so the law is pleasant only to the man who toils in its study. As water leaves the high places and rests in the lowlands, so the law leaves him whose disposition is haughty and cleaves to him whose disposition is lowly. As water is not kept fresh in vessels of silver and gold, but in vessels of earthenware, so the law is not maintained firmly except in him who makes himself as a vessel of earthenware. As a great man is not ashamed to ask a small man, give me water to drink, so the great man must not be ashamed to say to the small man, teach me a chapter, a verse, a saying, or even a letter. As water, if a man knows not how to swim, swallows him up, so the words of the law, if a man knows not how to swim in them and to teach them, end by swallowing him up. But lest one should suppose that as water, if it is kept for long in a jar, becomes foul and sour, so it is with the words of the law. Therefore the law is also compared with wine, for wine which grows old in a bottle becomes more valuable. So the words of the law, as a man grows older, become more precious to him, or because water does not make the heart rejoice. Therefore the law is also compared to wine, which makes the heart rejoice. For the law rejoices the heart, Psalm 19:8. But because wine is sometimes bad for the head and body, therefore the words of the law are also compared to oil, for like oil they refresh and brighten the head and the body. But because oil is half bitter and half sweet, therefore the law is also compared with honey. As honey is sweet, so are the words of the law, Psalm 19:10. But it's in honey there is wax, lest one should suppose that it is so with the law. It is also compared with milk, as milk is pure, So is the law, but milk is tasteless. This milk is tasteless. Therefore, the law is compared to milk and honey combined, for as these two combined are good for the body, so with the law, as it says, it shall be healthy to thy body and healing to thy flesh. Proverbs 3:8, 4:22, Canticles R, section 2 and 3 on 1 and 2, 6a, see selection 506. Oh, by comma, do they mean 2, 1 when they should have a dot? Is it 1, 2, or is it 1 and 2, or is it 2? 438, Sifra, Deuteronomy, Akab, section 48, folio 84a, H, page 110, 111, CRT, page 37. As water is gratis for all, so is the Torah gratis for all. As water is priceless, so is the Torah priceless. As water brings life to the world, so the Torah brings life to the world. As water brings a man out of his uncleanness, so Torah brings man from the evil way into the good way. As wine cannot keep good in vessels of gold and silver, but only in cheap earthenware vessels, so the words of the Torah keep good only with him who makes himself lowly. Like wine, words of the Torah rejoice the heart. As wine grows better by keeping, so the words of the law become better as a man grows older. Sefer Deuteronomy, Akab, 48, 84a, H, 110, 111, RT, 37, 439, 10 dBl, page 105. Just as water forms a purifying bath, so do the words of Torah purify all. Torah purifies the sinners in Israel when they repent, even if they have served idols. As it says, I will sprinkle clean water upon you, and you shall be clean. And by water is meant words of Torah. 10 dBl, page 105. 440, Canticles R, 1, section 3, 2, on 1, 3, folio 6b. As oil is made good only by heating, so only through suffering does Israel repent. Well, I'd put hardships, not suffering, but as oil on the top of another liquid, when the cup is full, does not flow over with other liquids, so the words of the law do not flow over the lips in connection with words of frivolity. As oil in a full cup drives out a drop of water which has fallen into the cup, so the words of the law drive out frivolous words from your heart, and so too frivolous words drive out the words of the law. As the oil brings light to the world, so Israel gives light to the world. As it says, the nations shall come to thy light. Isaiah 60, verse 3, Canticles R, 1, section 3, 2, on 1, 3, folio 6b. 441, Sefer Deuteronomy, Barakah, section 343, folio 143a, finished to 143b, initial. From his right hand went a fiery law for them. I think I talked about that previously in this program. Deuteronomy 33:2. It's somebody whose community went Mount Hira, Yemen. Deuteronomy 33:2. The words of the Torah are compared to fire, for both were given from heaven, both are eternal. If a man draws near the fire, he is burnt. If he keeps afar, he is frozen. So with him the words of the Torah, if a man toils in them, they are life to him. If he separates from them, they kill him. Fire is made use of both in this world and the next. And so too with the Torah, fire leaves its mark on him who makes use of it, and so does the Torah. As those who work with fire are recognized, so are they who toil in the Torah. For students of the law are recognized in the street by their walk, their speech, and their dress. Sefer Deuteronomy, Barakah, section 343, folio 143a, finished to 143b, initial. And, we might want to think about the Sufi references to the whole, I was cooked and then I was burnt, and, this is the sort of thing they're talking about. The bit about he is burnt is in Friedman's text, but it gives a poor sense. It would be an unusual remark. It is note Friedman suggests that for Nikwe, he is burned. We should read In henna, he derives benefit, and this gives a better sense. The reading burnt would mean be careful, beware. If you were incautious, your treatment of the Torah, it may burn you up. In this case, close would be too near. The misuse or neglect of Torah is compared with a poison. Some, in selection 332, HL, and are recognized. This would seem to suggest humility, since artisans who work with fire and coals would presumably be soiled in person and raiment. The idea that fire is made use of in the world to come is very strange. It might, on one hand, indicate a belief in a very material heaven, or possibly the world of the resurrection may still be conceived of as earth, but a finer earth than now, or fire may be regarded as a metaphor for God, the consuming fire, or a reminiscence of the fire at the law giving on Sinai. About the giving of the law, there are endless stories and reflections. Why, for instance, it is often asked, was the law given in the wilderness? One answer is to the effect that the law is, in one sense, for all proselytes may accept its yoke, or again, the scene being laid in the wilderness shows that the law was, in the first instance, offered to all. Selection 442, numbers are Bamidbar 1:7. The wise have taught that the law was given in three things, in fire, in water, and in the desert. In fire, as it is said, and Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke. Exodus 19:18. In water, as it is said, the clouds dropped water. Judges 5:4. And in the desert, as it is said, and the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. Numbers 1:1. And why was it given thus? To show that as these three things are given gratis to all the inhabitants of the world, so the words of the law were given gratis, as it is said, Ho, all that thirst, come to the waters. Isaiah 55:1. In the wilderness of Sinai, he who does not make himself free in the wilderness, i.e., humble to learn from all and ready to teach all, cannot acquire wisdom in the Torah. Numbers are Bamidbar 1:7, 443, Mech Betchodesh Yitro, section 5, page 222, Mech, volume 2, page 437. The law was given in the wilderness, and in the fire, and in water. As these three are free to all the inhabitants of the world, so are the words of the law free to all the inhabitants of the world. Mech Betchodesh Yitro 5, 222, Mech, volume 2, page 237. Well, what about that other narrations we heard earlier about they wouldn't let the guy in because he didn't have the money to pay the daily fee to hear the spiritual teaching? 444, Mech Betchodesh Yitro, section 1, page 205, section 5, page 222, Mech, section 5, volume 2, page 236. The law was given publicly and openly in a place to which no one had any claim, for if it had been given in the land of Israel, the nations of the world could have said, we have no portion in it. Therefore it was given in the wilderness publicly and openly, and in a place to which no one had any claim. Everyone who desires to accept it, let him come and accept it. RT, page 76 and 77, Mech Betchodesh Yitro, section 1, page 205, section 5, page 222, Mech, section 5, volume 2, page 236. Other explanations are such as these. 445, numbers are Chukat 19:26. Why was the law given in the wilderness? Because if it had been given in the promised land, the tribe on whose territory it had been given might have said of the other tribes, I am better than you. It was given in the wilderness because they all were equal. Or again, as in the wilderness there is no sowing nor tilling, as from him who receives the yoke of the law, they remove the yoke of worldly occupations. Or again, he who fulfills the law makes himself like unto an empty wilderness and disregards all other influences. Numbers R. Hukat 19:26. Selection 446, Pesquet 107a, Erub 54a, 1341. Why was the law given in the desert? To teach you that if a man does not make himself free to all as the desert, he is not worthy to receive the law. Words left out. And as the wilderness has no limit, so the words of the law have no limit. As it is said, the measure thereof is larger than the earth and broader than the sea. Job 11:9. And as the words of the law have no limit, so has their reward no limit. As it says, how great is thy goodness, which thou hast laid up for them that fear thee. Psalm 31:19, see note 44 and page 18. We're on page 167. Pesquet 107a, Erub 54a. See also selection 1341 when that's posted. The word free to all is not without some difficulty. Mr. Loewe says it may mean makes himself free from prepossessions, empties himself of prejudices, i.e. receives the law in simple and open faith. To the rabbis, the law was a sort of binding link between man and God. Moreover, it existed in heaven ages before it was given to man. It was one of the earliest of God's creations. It was adored by the angels and by God himself. 447, Exodus R, Wayera 12:3. When God created the world, he decreed that the heavens are the heavens of the Lord, and the earth is for man. Psalm 115, verse 16. But when he intended to give the law, he repealed the former decree, and he said, the lower shall ascend to the upper, and the upper shall descend to the lower, and I will make a beginning. As it is said, and the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai, and he said to Moses, come up unto the Lord. Increasing existence, probably. Exodus 19:20, Exodus R, Wayera 12:3. There are strange passages in the rabbinic literature which speak of God himself as a student and teacher of the law, but if we remember that to the rabbis, Torah was meant and included all wisdom, the strangeness is lessened. Perfect wisdom must, as it were, think wisdom, even as to Aristotle, God the thinker thinks thought. Besides being a student, God is also a teacher of the law. 448. Tunch B, Yitro 38b. God said to Israel, on this day I have given you the law, and individuals toil at it, but in the world to come I will teach you it to all Israel, and they will not forget it. Note 28. Tunch B, Yitro 38b. More quotes. TJ Sub 8D, line 27, where God teaches the souls of the righteous in heaven. The picture of God teaching the law like the head of a rabbinical academy, Bab M, 85b, 86a, has been the occasion of some rather witless pleasantries, but instruction in religion is not the most unbecoming occupation that can be imagined. For God in heaven, or in the world to come, volume 3, page 85. Again, in the hour when Moses went up to heaven, he found God sitting and weaving crowns for the letters. Men 29b. The crowns are the little flourishes with which some letters of the alphabet are ornamented in the scrolls of the law. Too many, says Moore, with his genial sarcasm. In whose imagination of God, portentous dignity is a dominant attribute. Such occupations seem unbecoming, and for want of a sense of humor, they have set them down to the rabbinical idea of God, all the more absurd in association with the transcendence which the rabbis were supposed to ascribe to him. Volume 3, page 135. Selection 449, Deuteronomy R, Nitzabim 8:5. God said, if you read the law, you do a kindness. for you help to preserve my world, since if it were not for the law, the world would again become without form and void, as before creation. Genesis 1:2, words left out. The matter is like a king who had a precious stone, and he entrusted it to a friend. And he said to him, I pray you pay attention to it, and guard it as is fitting, for if you lose it, you cannot pay me its worth, and I have no other jewel like it. And so you would sin against yourself and against me. Therefore do the duty by both of us, and guard the jewel as is fitting. So Moses said to the Israelites, if you keep the law, not only upon yourselves do you confer a benefit, but also upon God, as it is said, and it shall be a benefit for us. Deuteronomy 6:25. The Midrash takes us to mean God and Israel, and the word said, akah, AV, righteousness, it takes to mean benefit, which led to its later signification of alms. Deuteronomy R, Nitzabim 8:5. Mitzvah is used here as an unusual sense, i.e. as kindness. See the commentaries. Metanote K and note of Einhorn. The passage is hardly capable of Weissensch's rendering. See First's note on Uensche, page 130. See our selection 753, and that's HL's note. 450, Sab 89a. When Moses came down from God, Satan came before God and said, where is the Torah? God said, I have given it to the earth. Satan went to the earth and said, where is the Torah? The earth replied, God alone knows the way thereof. Job 28:23. Alone is implied. Then he went to the sea and to the deep, and they said, it is not with us. Job 28:14. Then he returned and said to God, I have inquired all over the earth and have not found it. God said, go to the son of Amram. So he went to Moses and said to him, where is the law which God gave to you? Moses said, what am I that God should have given the Torah to me? Then God said to Moses, Then God said, Moses, are you a liar? Then Moses said, this lovely and hidden thing in which day by day thou tookest thy pleasure, should I take the credit of it? Words left out. Then God said, because you have made yourself small, therefore it shall be called by thy name, as it says, remember the law of Moses, my servant. Malachi 3:2, Sab 89a. Selection 451, Zeb 116a. When the law was about to be given to the Israelites, a loud noise went forth from one end of the earth to the other. Terror seized the peoples in their palaces, and they sang, as it is said in the palaces, AV, his palace, all say glory, Psalm 29:9. They gathered together to Balaam and said, what is this tremendous noise which we have heard? Is a new flood coming upon the earth? He replied, God has sworn that he will never bring another flood. Then they said, but perhaps he is going to bring a flood, not of water, but of fire. He replied, he has sworn that he will never again destroy all flesh. Then they said, what then was the noise? He replied, God has a precious treasure in his storehouse, which has been stored up for 973 generations before the creation of the world, and now he proposes to give it to his creation. Then they said, may God bless his people with peace. Psalm 29:11, Zeb 116a. The Torah was in existence 1,000 generations before the creation. Psalm 105:8. Well, the real revelations, right? And there were 26 generations from Adam to Moses. 1,000 minus 26 is 974. 26 generations, okay. Further, the creation of man was postponed for 1,000 years, while the jinn were around, was the idea that the Satan and the beings of like humans but of fire. What's the verse? Isaiah has that somewhere. Both man and Torah having been contemplated 1,000 years before the creation, several explanations, too long to be cited, here endeavor to show why 974 is right and 1026 would be wrong, but none seems clear or satisfactory. See, for example, Rashi on the two TB passages, 451, 452 of the selections, Gen R 110, the 111, page 10, 28 for the 262, where we see the commentaries. Metanote K, Pseudo Rashi, Yafeh, Toar, Wolf, Einhorn, etc. And that's HL's note. Oh, I thought when we started this that we're going to go over why they come out the number less than 6,000 as the Hebrew year. 452, Sab 88b to 89a. R. Joshua B. Levy said, when Moses went up to God, the angels said, what has a son of woman to do among us? God said, he has come to receive the law. They said, the beautiful Torah which thou hast hidden away since creation and for 974 generations before creation, dost thou purpose to give it to one of flesh and blood? Then God said, Moses, answer them. Moses replied, I fear they may burn me with the breath of their mouths. God said, hold fast to my throne of glory and answer them. Then Moses said, what is written in the law which thou gavest me? I am the Lord your God who brought you forth from Egypt. Did you, he said to the angels, go down to Egypt?